absolutely listening. If you listen to your partner, that's the best foreplay there is.
That's true.
Oh yeah, no, I mean oral sex is pretty good too, but listening's
How did
okay.
I get in the middle of this conversation?
I'm sorry. Are we embarrassing
I mean,
you?
really?
Are we embarrassing you here? I'm sorry. Let's get back
No.
to the interview.
I'm too old to be embarrassed.
Oh, you're not. You're my age, right?
Victor, go ahead.
Yeah.
Eden, you and I are peers, I assume, right? You talked about the 50s and 60s, so I assume we're peers.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right, so let's get on with the interview. So you were talking about
too funny.
your meeting with Hans Holzer. So continue the story from where you left off, please.
Well, what was really wonderful was that he said, well, come and see me. And, he lived on the Upper West Side. And I remember going there the first time, and I was nervous. Of course, I wasn't nervous because it was Hans. I was nervous because it was Hans Holzer, not because it was a grown-up. But I was just excited to see, because at that point, of course, I knew who he was. And I went in armed with my list at the time of the different things that had been happening. I called them odd occurrences in our house. And we sat down and went over that. And I remember he had this really big piano. It probably was a grand piano. I don't know if it was a baby. I always thought it was a grand, beautiful piano. And but we went into his study, which was this long, sort of skinny room like a shoebox. And I went in, and there was a couch on the left side, and I'm sure his daughter would attest to this. And on the right side was his desk and all these books, and he had all these filing things. And I mean, he just had stuff all over there. But it wasn't a huge space. Anyway, we started talking, and long story short, Hans said that yes, he would come out to Bucks County. I said, I'm sure my parents will be happy to pay you. And supposedly my father said, yes, not a problem, come. And for some reason he didn't come, and that's another story. But he would tell me, and I think, I always thought that maybe one of the reasons that he didn't come at that time was that, I always felt that based on all the things that I told him, because I did tell him about things that I really saw and knew and felt and heard all my life that I remembered. He was the first person that I really opened up to until I saw Lily. So, I was in 7th grade, so I was like 13. And I used to go and see him all the time because I'd go into the city sometimes every week. And from Pennsylvania, and I would go in and I would talk to him, and he would suggest books for me to read, and we'd talk about all kinds of things that had to do with the occult, or that had to do with sort of mysticism and that kind of thing. And he was the first adult, and certainly, an amazingly brilliant man, to really help me to understand some of what was going on. Of course, he didn't say to me, child, you're a psychic or a psychic medium or any of those things. But he would tell me what to do. He would say, well, if this happens again with, this haunting, and he would say, try going outside and telling that entity, telling that soul to come outside into the garden, and that you would talk to them about the light, and that, and he would explain to me that, that see the light, and that they're really stuck there because, they keep reliving, some history that they don't understand, that they really need to go, to heaven or spirit or wherever. And I don't remember, and of course, I realized that he was very well known, but, I was so used to meeting famous people, it's just that I didn't know anybody who was famous with ghost hunting, that I didn't ask for his autograph, I didn't get pictures of him, and I didn't ask him to write any of this down, because I would write notes, and he would tell me what to do, and sometimes he'd type something up a little bit and give it to me. So anyway, I would go and I would try doing those things. Unfortunately, I wasn't able. I think that the woman who was around in the nightgown, I think I was actually able to free her, because I don't recall her coming back after a certain point when I was doing that. But I wasn't able to do that with some of the other entities that were there. And as it turned out, but there is more to the story, as it turned out, when we moved, my mother said that she couldn't believe his timing, because the day that we were moving to New York and they packed up the house and the moving trucks were leaving, it was a very large house, and so everybody was going, she said, we got this phone call. The phone was still working until the end of that day. And she said, we got this phone call, and it was Hans, and he wanted to come out like that weekend or something. And she said, you can't. We don't own the house anymore. And he was insistent. And she said, I can't do it. But long story short, not about the house anymore, but we moved to Madrid, and my mother and Hans, kept up a nice correspondence. And I think it was that first summer, my mother went to visit Hans, and he and his family used to go back to Vienna, where their families, he and his wife's family, were from, in the summer, and spend summers there. And my brother, Marshall, and my mother went to Vienna and visited with Hans and his family, and he and his daughter, I thought that he had two daughters. I don't really remember, but I know that the daughter who was around my brother's age was friendly to my brother, and apparently my brother said he, had a nice little, time with her chatting or, whatever. They stayed, I think, for a few days. Anyway, long story short, my mother, who was then getting into more metaphysical and occult, not occult like, ghosty kinds of things, but really more metaphysical things. She was reading Carl Jung, and she was really getting into yoga and meditating and so forth. And so she and my father decided with Hans that they would put together something that was called Intercult. And I actually still have the two brochures that were made. And it was going to be in September of 1973 in Madrid. It was an international conference on parapsychology and the occult sciences. And it was this whole 2-week thing, and they were having the famous British witch named Sybillique coming.
Oh, yeah, I remember Sybillique, yeah.
Sure. And the Dr. Argamosa, who was a famous parapsychologist in Spain, was doing the opening address, and then Hans Holzer was doing a class in the history of parapsychology, and they were doing all these things. Sybillique was doing a workshop in astrology and yada, yada, yada. For 2 weeks this was going on, okay? Supposed to go on. And they were just getting to the point where they were going to advertise in America, and Hans was taking, charge of what was going on in the States, and my parents were, doing the Madrid, the Spain thing. And we got a knock on the door one Saturday morning, and these men came to the door who in America would be like the secret police, which we do have in the United States.
Yes. And
they were called the grises in Spain because they wore gray. That means gray, and they were the grays. And they came to the door like, hello? It was like 9 a.m. And they spoke only Spanish, so my father had to get his secretary who was interpreting. And what they said was, you have been having people from the university put posters around Madrid, and they have to do with intercult. And they said, General Franco, who was the dictator then of Spain, says, this is not supposed to happen in Spain. This is illegal. It's against the law. So if you don't have those taken down right away and cease and desist, you'll go to jail. So, yeah, long story short, Hans and my parents never, brought this thing to fruition. Yeah.
That's absolutely an amazing story. Chris, can you imagine growing up, number one, with Hans Holzer as a mentor and then being involved with him in such a way? I mean, that would be like my dream life.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, what else could you say about that? I wish it was me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Eden, when are you writing the book?
Yeah, right. I know.
Seriously.
One of these days when I have time. But he, what was cool was that as a teenager, I was definitely very into. I mean, I used to read about Aleister Crowley, and sort of things like that. My godbrother was really into that, and I looked into witchcraft, white witchcraft, and the black arts, which scared me, and so I didn't go further. But
are you? Excuse me. Are you my lost sister? Because you and I. It sounds like we have very similar upbringing. I mean, very similar childhoods. Really, it's amazing.
We need to talk about it sometime.
Yes, we do.
Not just
Absolutely.
on the radio, right?
Yeah, off radio, I think. Yeah.
yeah. And I was studying Hinduism and Buddhism and all of those kinds of things. And
oh my
God. So what would happen is I would go sometimes to see a psychic. Because, I was like, oh, yeah, I want to know what's happening in my life or when I'm going to have another boyfriend or, something. And I would go and I would ask Hans, who can I go see? And he would direct me. So I never knew that some of the people that I was going to see were in those days very famous, readers and so forth. And I'm trying to remember the name of this woman, and I cannot think of it now. But she used to do spirit writing. She was so cool. And, so he would send me to people that he knew. And one time I had gone to see someone out in New Hope, Pennsylvania, where, we used to live near there. And this person scared me and told me some things. I can't remember if it was reading tarot cards, I think. And I was terrified. And I called Hans. And in those days, again, people who are younger don't know, we not only did we not have cell phones, but, in those days we used to have pay phones, and you had to have a quarter or a dime, depending on how far the call was, to be able to make a call. And I had to call him in New York. I was at school. I was terrified because this person had said something that was scaring me about my life. I thought I was going to get hit by a car and all these terrible things were going to happen, and I was very frightened. And I remember Hans gave me, this was to me the best advice that I've ever gotten, because he said, I know many, many, many psychics and tarot card readers and astrologers all around the world. And he said, I know the professional ones, the ones who are really good. And he said, no matter what, no matter who you go and see and how famous they are or how new they are, he said, you must always look at anything that comes to you with a grain of salt, at least, or more. Not take it as the absolute truth, because they're giving you information based on what they are intuiting or what they are seeing, but it can be colored by who they are and what they do or don't know. And sometimes they may not understand things in your life that you may not understand yet but will later on. So they may be misinterpreting things and therefore frightening you.
Wow.
And so I would go to Hans a lot of times when I was frightened about things, and he was wonderful.
What an amazing mentor you had. What a blessing and what a gift. If each person who has the experiences that we have had a mentor like that, like Hans Holzer when we were younger, what a different world this would be, just for all of us and for the people that we serve and help. Do you know his daughter Alexandra by any chance? Have you met Alexandra?
No, she, I believe, was the one, probably about my brother's age. That
she's wonderful, wonderful woman.
How old is your brother?
My brother is, let's see, I'm 61. He's 5.5 years younger than I am. So.
No, she's younger than me.
No,
I'm 40.
Yeah,
she's got to be 40.
Yeah, Alexandra's in her early 40s. Yeah, younger daughter. Yeah, okay.
So yeah. Doesn't he have a second daughter? Didn't he have an older one? I can't remember.
Probably has an older
daughter. If he does,
yeah.
I don't know about her. I know Alexandra. I don't know of any other daughter. And I know she's younger than me, and I'm 46. Yeah. I'm going to say she's between 40 and 42.
Yeah, she's in her early 40s, yeah. You're listening to Second Sight Radio on the D.T.M. Wicked Radio Network. He's psychic medium Chris George. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Our wonderful guest tonight, psychic medium, animal communicator, and amazingly informative woman, Eden Scott Cross, who've had so many experiences that I'm drooling, Eden. I can't believe I'm actually drooling about what you're sharing about your childhood, meeting Alexander.
Put your tongue back in your mouth, Victor. We're on the air.
No. Meeting Hans Holzer and having him as a mentor. I mean, that's a dream come true. Eden, why don't you tell our listeners again how they can find out about you and the work that you do?
The best ways are, one, if you go to Facebook and find me, Eden Cross animal communicator. That's my Facebook page. If for any reason you can't find that or you don't belong on Facebook, then the best thing to do is Google me. Google Eden Cross, because apparently there's some psychic, I don't know if she's, legitimate or not.